Hello YouTube and welcome to my review of The Amazing Spider-Man number 16, Volume 7. Before we begin, we're going to get into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled, here's your warning. Let's take a look at the creative team. This issue is written by Joe Kelly with art by John Romita Jr. Issue 16 picks up with the Back on Earth storyline, opening with a montage that revisits several characters in Peter's world. We start at Peter's apartment where Ben Reilly is currently staying. Then we see Aunt May texting someone, Tombstone training, and Norman Osborn working in his lab. All of them have one thing in common. They're thinking of Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Ben is struggling with the idea that he's not filling in for Spider-Man this time. Norman is. Aunt May is texting with J. Jonah Jameson, who's concerned about Peter. Tombstone feels something is off with Spider-Man. And Norman is wrestling with the decision to wear the Spidey suit again, realizing that doing good as Norman Osborn doesn't matter to people. But doing good as Spider-Man does. Spider-Man gives people hope. We then cut to Ben at Peter's job, working with Brian and Astrid on developing a low-cost, sustainable building material. After a few adjustments, their project is a success. Astrid reminds Ben to include her name on the patent application. But this only reminds Ben that Peter will ultimately get the credit for his work, not him. Next, we move to Central Park. Norman is meeting with Maria, Peter's boss. She asks him how he managed losing a child while still juggling the pressures of running a company, seeking advice because her own son is sick. As Norman is about to open up, he gets an alert. The Shocker is back. Before leaving, Norman thanks Maria for trusting him and offers to help any way he can. As he heads off, he wonders how many times Peter has had to make this same impossible choice. Help one person or help many, and how Peter survives letting Spider-Man take such a toll on his personal life. When Norman arrives, he discovers it wasn't Shocker at all. It was Tombstone calling. Tombstone passes along Shocker's regards, letting Spider-Man know to go F himself after the beating he gave him. When Norman asked what Tombstone wants, Tombstone simply replies, "I want to know if you're all right." Cut to Aunt May, her boyfriend, and J. Jonah discussing Peter. Jonah thinks it's time to intervene. May shuts this down fast, saying if he wants to co-parent, she'll get him an adoption application. She explains that Peter isn't suffering, and she knows this because when Peter is hurting, he pushes people away. Back with Tombstone and Norman as Spidey. Tombstone calls out how different Spider-Man has been lately, how aggressive, how angry, and even in their past, their conflicts were never as vicious as this. Suddenly, BLc&x attacks. His power? He can absorb one person's pain and transfer it to someone else. Tombstone explains that Plague has taken the pain of Shocker and his men and has dumped it all onto Spider-Man. Tombstone joins the fight, eager to see how the new Spider-Man handles both him and the pain. Norman, meanwhile, is torn. He's not Peter. He wants to win. And he wants to hurt Tombstone. Using his web shooter bracelets, he blocks a punch, breaking Tombstone's arm, and punching him, knocking him to the ground. Norman tells Tombstone, "My world is pain." But he stops himself before going too far, and asks BLc&x to help Tombstone, and swings away. We then cut back to Ben at Peter's job. He's staring at their project on the computer screen, and he sees Peter's name attached to it, and realizes how exhausted he is from trying to be Peter, and he asked himself, what would Peter do? And that's where issue 16 ends. Overall, I thought this was another really strong story. I really like what Joe Kelly is doing and building in this series so far. The opening panel montage took a little moment to click, but once it did, it kind of all came together. For me, the best Spider-Man stories are ones that weave his supporting cast, and Joe Kelly handles this really well. Especially, I think, Aunt May. He seems to be writing her in a style where she's kind of a wise, strong old woman instead of just a liability to Peter. I'm generally interested in seeing how the story develops once Peter returns. Ben as Peter, Norman as Spider-Man. I think there's a lot of potential there. I really enjoyed this issue. It was a fun read, engaging read. And I'm going to go ahead and give it another high score. We're going to go give it 4 webheads out of 5. I think that's back-to-back 4 web heads for the two last issues, so issues 15 and 16. So that's my review. So let me know down in the comments if you picked up issue 16. What did you think of the story? What did you think of the art? And if you're not reading it, I hope you enjoyed my review. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next video.